Whatever your adventure is, let loose the dogs of adventure and chase it. If it's going to the grocery store, make that your adventure. Whatever, it doesn't matter, but chase your adventure because if you sit back and let the adventure get away from you, it's your loss. But if you go after it and you trip and fall on your face 10 or 20 times, I've done that. That's just all part of the adventure.
What did the Apostle Paul and a former CIA officer have in common? More than you might think. In this episode of Seek, Go, Create, the Leadership Journey, we're joined by Jeffrey Sanow, a former senior intelligence officer with CIA whose career took him across the globe, including over 100 missions to Syria, where he regularly walked the very road to Damascus that transformed Saul into who we know as Paul. Jeff brings a rare blend of deep faith and high level operational experience to the conversation, offering powerful insights on integrity, leadership under pressure, and how spiritual transformation can inform strategic decision making. This is a conversation that will challenge, inspire, and reframe how you think about calling, courage, and the cost of conviction. Jeffrey, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Glad that you're here too. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of these stories. And man, it's rare that I get first of all, it's rare that I get someone who's got CIA or a three-letter attached. And then also that can tie in some of the spiritual conversations we love to have. Man, this is going to be fun. Before we get too much further, though, would you rather answer the question, what do you do? If someone's, you're out and about or on a podcast and someone asks you that, or who are you? Which would you prefer? Go ahead and pick it and start answering.
What do I do is easy and boring. Who am I is much more complicated and entertaining. I am a farm boy from Ohio. I grew up on a small farm there. My parents were divorced when I was 11, so I went through a lot of the entertainment the children of divorce go through. And so at the age of 20, after I'd been at Ohio State University for 2 years, I decided to go ahead and run away from home formally. So I joined the Peace Corps and went to North Africa. And after 2 years there, I still wasn't ready to go back to Ohio because that was the only thing looking at me, more of that cold wind and whistles between those buildings at Ohio State University in the winter. No. My blood was too thick. So I went to another country. I went to Gabon, which is right on the equator. And just so you know how impressed my mother was with me, she was thrilled when I said I was going to Gabon because she went, "That's where Albert Schweitzer's hospital is." Want to guess what my response was? "Who's that?" So that's where Albert Schweitzer's hospital is. That I've never forgotten. I was there for a year and a half. Then due to some other family machinations, I just had to go ahead and leave. Went to school in Texas, finished up my bachelor's and master's degree. First job out of college was at a poultry processing plant in Waco, Texas. After my second day there, I was pretty sure that was not the job that my mother had in mind for me. So from there, I applied to various international organizations, international businesses, and I was very fortunate. I was able to spend 3 years in India, where I was selling irrigation equipment for a large company called Valmont Industries. I was there 3 years, and ultimately we ended up signing a contract to export plastic components back to the U.S. So after that, I went back to the U.S. and managed to find a job in Greece. We went back over to Athens, where the company was supposedly investing in a latex glove manufacturing facility, which of course never came to pass. So after 2 years, it's like, okay, there's no job here. So I had to leave. I went back to Texas, got continuing education certification in telecommunications management. This was back when the internet was still not barely a glimmer in Al Gore's eye, and proceeded to get a job working for a company out of Houston, but I was based in Abu Dhabi, and I was selling telecommunication network management systems throughout the Middle East, which is what brought me to Syria so many times. And I was there for 6 years, decided to come back and let my adventurous streak take over, applied to the agency, got accepted because by that time I'd lived in multiple countries, spoke multiple languages, and they really liked that. and I was accepted. And so that's where I wrapped up my career, doing God's work. And let me just tell your listeners one thing right now. The people, the rank and file people in the CIA are the best that this country has to offer. They should take a great deal of confidence in that. I'm not talking about the leadership issues and all the political nonsense that goes on. I'm talking about the folks who show up at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, work until 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, and do that 5 days a week, sometimes 6 or 7 days a week. They are the best this country has to offer, and no matter what you see on TV, your listeners should take a great deal of pride in the workforce that is at the CIA.
I'm excited to do a little bit more of a dive into that CIA in just a little while, but there's so many parts of this story. As I think I told you, I'm maybe about halfway through your book that I've been reading, and we'll talk about that as we go along here. Uh, human for humanity. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but I want to
Yes,
ask
sir.
about that. I'm going to ask about that in a little while. But first, I mean, how many countries have you been to? Because you rattled off some names that are not your, Gabon and, Tunisia and all these. So, they're not your average Joe traveler country. I went to France, I went to Australia. No, that's not what I'm hearing from you. How many countries and good gracious, the
I
road.
think the total number when I sat down and added them up was 33 different countries I've either lived in or visited. I think I've lived in 12, somewhere between 10 and 12 that I've actually lived in. And, I enjoyed it. It was a blessing. I'm not going to deny that. And I like to think that I was doing good. And, the book, human stands for human intelligence. And Americans, by and large, have been protected by these two really big bodies of water on either side and a really cold neighbor to the north and a river to the south. So we're very internally focused. You don't need to go any place to get what you need to eat, drink, sleep with, whatever. We have all that here. And yet there's a huge world out there. And I wrote it so that people could get a flavor for some of the world that's out there, the 5-foot elevation level, not the 45 seconds you'll get on CNN or Fox News or whatever, but to actually get a glimpse of some of the silliness that my wife got, my now ex-wife, God bless her, put up with when her first time outside of this country was in New Delhi, India. So, that's who my book is dedicated to. And a lot of people look at me kind of cross-eyed going, you dedicated your book to your ex-wife? What does your current wife think about that? Well, that book ends about 10 years before I met my current wife. So she doesn't care either way. Honestly, I probably would have done it anyway, even if she did care. Because none of that book, none of what you read would have been possible without my ex-wife. So that's why.
That dedication, I think I was laying in bed and I mentioned to my wife, I said, Jeffrey dedicated this book to his ex-wife. I said, I bet there's a story there. And I said, you know what? I'm going to ask about it. You just told the story, so I don't have to ask about it. I said, because he put it in the front of his book. So it opens up the door for me to ask. But anyway, before we get too far, though, this is where I want to go. I do agree that as Americans, I believe we're a little bit arrogant about our position in the world and things like that. I don't necessarily want to go down that path. We've traveled a good bit. And I mean, when we talk about roads less traveled, I shared with you in the beginning, my wife and I have essentially been traveling for the last 12 years. We've been homeless. We don't have a home. We live in this motor coach. And so we've been traveling all over the US for 6 years. But before that, we were in Australia, New Zealand. And then during the 90s, I spent time in New Delhi and Mumbai and places like that. But I think it would be valuable, Jeffrey, to share just maybe some of your favorite places. What are some places maybe that you would rather not go back to again? Not that we're disparaging anybody, but you would probably rather not. So give a few of the highs and lows just of the travel, not jobs and stuff like that, but just the places.
So I'm going to give you two examples. The first one is one of my favorite countries, which is Oman. Oman is the country where some people claim Sinbad the sailor sailed from. And there's actually a mock-up of his ship on one of the traffic circles in Oman. The people of Oman are hardworking. They don't have oil wealth. So, I mean, they have a tiny bit, but not like Saudi Arabia or the Emirates. I made the mistake of asking the receptionist at the hotel I was staying in, I think the Hyatt Regency in Muscat, Oman. I asked her what country she was from, and she looked at me like I had two heads. From Oman. So they work and they tend to be very polite. I was on the beach with my wife, my cousin, who was a flight attendant for United Airlines, a very attractive lady in her 30s, and our two daughters, who would have been, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, something like that. So we were all on the beach in Oman, and a group of men come riding up on horseback. And the leader of the group got off and came over and talked to me. Of course, he's going to talk to me. He's not going to talk to the women. Came over and talked to me and said, my uncle would like to offer 12 camels for this young lady, pointing to my cousin. You know, you have that split second of, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with this? Well, it was everything was courteous. Okay. No, nobody should misread anything on this. They were very courteous. They were very polite. I was equally courteous back. I said, we're very honored. That's a very generous offer, but we're going to have to decline. And they said, okay. And they wrote on. I have not let my cousin forget that. I've not let my aunt, her mother is my godmother. And so she hasn't forgot that. So every time my cousin Deb is going to go visit Jeff someplace, her mother's like, you got to be really careful going any place Jeff is. You almost got it. It's hilarious. But that's Oman, a very friendly country, lots of good memories, beautiful beaches. The markets are great. It's always been an entree point for the Indian subcontinent. In fact, the Indian rupee used to be their currency for a long time. So it's just a very interesting, very friendly. I'll contrast this with what was once called the Pearl of the Mediterranean, and that was Beirut. And Beirut had all of the positive influence of North Africa. It had the positive influence from Turkey. It had the positive influence from Iran. It was a French colony. It had all the positive influences, and it truly was the Pearl of the Orient. To this day, Lebanese women are still considered to be the most beautiful in the Middle East. I think that's in some measure because the Crusaders were nice enough to drop off blue-eyed DNA. So every now and then you get a very pretty blue-eyed Lebanese woman. And then you fast forward to about 1985, when all the civil war started. And I compare Lebanon to Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston, you're old enough to remember when she came out. Was she not fabulous? Could that woman not sing? And she was beautiful as the day is long. But I think the first song was called Jump or something like that. I remember her jumping up and down a lot. And just phenomenal and beautiful. And it did not end well for her, very sadly. As with Lebanon, it's not ending well with them. So that's where I like to contrast. And I tell those stories to try and bring it home to people. Because everybody in the U.S. knows who Whitney Houston is. Or was, and how most people know, what she was like when she came out and how talented and the very sad ending. So those would be two of my favorite countries to talk about because I like Lebanon. I like Beirut. I had the ability to travel to Damascus many times. When you walk down the street called Straight and you realize it's written about in Acts chapter 9, I believe. Walking down a street that's written about in the Bible, that's got to mean something to somebody, even a miserable Lutheran like me. We do take that part seriously. So it was always very, very nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, we need to check and sure with your information you could gather to make sure Bobby Brown didn't visit Lebanon at some point because he's the one that messed up Whitney. I believe he messed up Whitney Houston. Maybe we could blame that on him. I'm not sure about that. And then I want to go back to the camel story though, because
Yes,
what's fascinating is I'm surprised you didn't negotiate. It's like 12 camels, no, but maybe 13. But I guess a bigger question, was that like a lucrative offer? I mean, 12 camels, is that a
it was a very
good
generous offer.
That was generous.
Yeah, that was a good offer.
Camels are valuable, right? So anyway, those point to the cultural differences that I think we somehow get locked into. Another thing that you talk about a good bit in your book, and I guess this is a good time to ask, is I think you are a strong proponent of learning the language when you spend
Yes, sir.
time in these places. And these are not easy languages, but talk about just in general the importance of, as you go into a culture, being able to learn and speak some, if not all, of their language. And then maybe any other specifics that you want to around the language thing. But in general, why is it important to learn the language of a culture that you're spending time in?
Well, there's really two reasons for it. The first one is simply respect. And you don't have to become fluent in a local language. If you can at least get through the greetings, the respectful, hi, how are you? Just basic minimal conversation. The woman who my book is dedicated to, as I said, her first time overseas was New Delhi. And her first trip to the market, she came back with a moldy tomato and said, "This is the only thing that I recognize." Okay, well, English is the national language in India. However, she learned enough of the local language that she could go to the shopkeepers and say, "Good afternoon, how are you?" And she could say, "I would like 6 of these," or "How much does that cost?" So just enough to engage them. So all of a sudden, you have a white American woman speaking in Hindi. That says a lot to the shopkeeper. Now, he's not going to give her the rock bottom price. That's just not going to happen. But at least he's going to give her a fair price. And once she's gone to that same vendor, 3, 4, 10 times, and he recognizes her because she's 5'10", attractive young woman, he's going to recognize her when she comes back. And he's going to make sure that she gets at least what she pays for. So she's getting good quality. He might offer and say, "No, don't get that one. Try these over here," because that's the way all vendors operate around the world. Once you are a regular customer, they're going to take good care of you. And so you prove that by being at least able to greet them, say hello, ask how much, some just fundamentals of conversation, and you will benefit because the people will benefit you. They were going to make sure that you have a good deal, you have a good day, whatever the case may be. And, if you get into trouble, it could be a traffic accident, could be tripped and fell, whatever it might be. I'm sure you've been around enough to know that there's all kinds of trouble you can get to in this world. If you've already established that you are a respectful person because you've learned to speak a little bit of the language, then there's going to be people that are going to help you out of respect for you. So they repay that respect. So that's why the language is so very important. I am not a linguist. You can ask all the people I was a Peace Corps volunteer with or overseas with. Nope, I am not a linguist. But I could get by, especially when I was going into Syria or Lebanon, because of all we talked about the blue eye DNA they deposited. My blue eyes didn't automatically mean I was a foreigner, and they couldn't quite figure out my Arabic accent. So between my blue eyes and my Arabic accent, they were like, "Where's this guy from?" But it wasn't automatically assumed that I was American. And I kind of liked it that way. Learning the language is, as I said, it's an important sign of respect for the culture and the country that you're in, and it will benefit you immensely when you're dealing with people, whether vendors or police or what have you. It will benefit you because of the respect you're showing their language and their country.
Yeah, and I also think it's helpful if you're doing business, negotiating, things like that, just because you could lose a lot. I've got a business that I interact with and work with a good bit right now. We're about to be sending a group of people. I'm not going with them. They're going over to Taiwan and then to China. And fortunately, we have an employee with our company who is Chinese originally, and she's been in the States for a while. So she's going to help us greatly because there's some negotiating that's going on in this. And so that's important. I love the word you use. It just shows respect. And I get discouraged when I see Americans as you travel, whatever the opposite of respect is, disrespect, obnoxiousness, whatever, they show that as tourists and travelers. To me, it sounds as if my wife and I say this about ourselves. We're really not good tourists. We do travel and we go places, but we like to hang out and spend time there. Sounds to me like you're not really a tourist. You're a traveler. You go places and you integrate into those places.
Absolutely. If I just want to see things, I can sit home on the TV and see things. But I want to connect with the people that I'm visiting. And, I lived in Thailand and I would go to the markets, and Thai is a very difficult language, trust me. But just being able to say hello, how are you? I don't know if you know what it's called, stinky fruit. It's got a more formal name. I can't think of what it's called right now, but it's very tasty and it's very smelly. Hotels won't let you put it in their refrigerators. But you go there and you say, I'd like some of this. And once you've made that connection, obviously I'm going to stick out in Thailand. I'm a 6'2" white boy from America. I'm going to stick out. So they're going to see me coming. They're going to recognize me and they're going to know probably what I'm coming to buy. And they're going to be able to give me good guidance because I'm a good customer. Why not take care of this guy who's respectful? So yeah, that bit of respect in the languages is very important.
Yeah, that's good. And one of the things in your story that I don't hear that often anymore. I used to hear it more, and that's just people that have experience with the Peace Corps. And so I think it would be valuable for me and probably the listener to just give just a brief, you don't have to tell the whole story of all that you did there, but the Peace Corps is one of these organizations that Kennedy, early 60s, and had a purpose, and you obviously have benefited greatly from it. I'm sure it still exists. I just haven't heard much from it. What can you educate us on the Peace Corps just so that we understand more about it?
Sure. The Peace Corps, as you said, was set up by Kennedy. Sergeant Shriver was the first director, and it was designed with three tenets in mind. First, take American values and demonstrate them at the village working level. Second, take English language and develop it in the countries where we want to do business. Third, bring the culture of whatever country you go to back to the United States and educate the Americans. I was, I was working on farm machinery. I was an agriculture mechanic. And in Tunisia, I would have been 20 years old when I got there. Would you like to guess on how interested these farmers were in what some 20-year-old white boy from America had to say about how they use their equipment? Not even, if I hit a zero, it was a good day. They had no interest in what I had to say. And they had their reasons for doing it. And one of the toughest lessons that you learn in the Peace Corps, and you learn a lot about yourself, is what do people need? What's important? And you have a lot of time for self-reflection. I can assure you of that. As you're trying to, I'm sitting out in some little village. I had electricity, but that's it. There was no TV. You read books. You made friends. And so I was able to do both of those things. I studied Arabic more when I was there. In fact, compliments of the internet, I just got contacted about a year ago by my old Arabic instructor. And so we reconnected. At any rate, the Peace Corps, the whole idea behind it is to put the best American values, the value that is contributory. We're giving, you're paid a little bit, you're paid a living stipend, not just enough to rent a house and eat food. Obviously, if there was any kind of emergency, a medical emergency, you are nominally a U.S. employee, government employee. So the U.S. government through the embassy is going to take care of you. That's a given. Short of that, you're pretty much on your own. You're on your own to make the kind of impact you want to make, to deal with the farmers the way you want to deal with them. For me, and then we had guys that dug water wells. We have a lot of English teachers. In fact, English teachers were my favorite because they were mostly female. And once again, let's go back to being 20 years old. So that's the contribution that they make. And it's not terribly often that you go into a village and you see a 20, 22, 23, 24, 25-year-old or older American working in that village, living with the villagers. It's not a perfect organization, and no one should think that. It's not a perfect experience. I mean, people leave Peace Corps early because they're not getting what they want, and that's fine. It's not a military organization.
Yeah.
It is largely an organization that is what you make of it.
Do they still exist and are they strong now? I just haven't heard much from them recently.
Actually, as I mentioned, my current wife is Ugandan, and I can assure you that the Peace Corps is active in Uganda because I was there. They actually invited me to one of their big gatherings. The law as written is you can go from being in the Peace Corps to being in the CIA, but you cannot go the other way. So I could go there and show up and shake hands and make nice, but they wouldn't let me work for them, which is fine. That wasn't what I was looking for. But they are still very active. They tended to, in Uganda, they're still working in agriculture. They work in fisheries. No, they're not quite as prominent now. And I suspect these days in the US government, everybody's keeping their head down because they don't want it to go along with their budget, get cut, so to speak. But yes, they're still very much there. They are a part of the State Department or an office of the State Department. So they're very active, as I said. In Eastern Europe and former Soviet bloc, I believe they're more involved in small business development, but they're still active there. Trying to think if they were in Thailand when I was there. I don't remember. I think they were. So, yeah, they're still out there. They're still doing things. And again, for me, Peace Corps offered me several escapes. Number one, I could get away from my family who were crazy. Divorce, blah, 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 blah. But it also offered me the opportunity to see places at the government expense that I would never see on my own. I had to work for a living. I had to make a contribution. I had to have some skill that I could offer. And in return, they basically said, okay, you go live here, call us at the end of 2 years. And you did what you made of it. In Gabon, which is right on the equator, that was a different environment. I was on an agriculture project and I supervised the equipment for about a dozen volunteers that were specialized in agriculture. And so I helped keep all the machinery working. And again, phenomenal experience. I'm living in a little town in the middle of Africa. And the only reason I had electricity was I controlled the generator for the project. So we ran a cable. One of the pictures you'll see in my book is us running the cable all the way across town. And I had to get over the big intersection. And so we put a gigantic pole up there to carry the cable to my house. But in that kind of environment, you basically have two choices. You can pull in and not do anything, or you can put yourself out there, risk yourself, risk embarrassment or whatever. Harm's not going to come to you, but you'll risk maybe embarrassing. Again, there I had to learn French, and there were plenty of challenges, plenty of bathroom challenges, upset stomach challenges. While I was in Gabon, the driver for the agriculture project I was on, he owned a small farm because they all own small farms. He said to me one day that he was going to go clear the land and would I like to go with him, which translated into go chop down trees with him. And so, sure, well, what am I? Yeah, let's go. And so we went out there. We spent the day chopping down trees. At the end of the day, I had so many blisters on my hands, I could barely use them. However, he would take my hand and show it to everybody on the workforce at the agriculture project and say, do you see these blisters that he got clearing land for me? This guy's a stud. Those blisters got me more credibility than any number of college degrees could have ever gotten me. The fact that I could work and sweat and suffer alongside a guy who had maybe a fourth grade education. I mean, because of that, that's how you generate connections. Anybody can talk. How many people are going to get out there and swing an axe all day? That's the difference. That's what Peace Corps lets us do. It puts us in the field. It puts us side by side with people who maybe remember that white boy that was there from America that helped clear the land so many years ago. And, oh, you should have seen all the blisters on his hand. I don't know. But certainly that's why Peace Corps is there, to make that impression on people. And then to bring back these kind of stories to say, Gabon's a wonderful place. No, they don't really have very much money. They're mostly pretty poor, but they sure do have a respectable life. They're happy. They love to drink and dance all night long. And they're drinking cheap beer. Well, the government makes sure the beer is cheap for obvious reasons. Drunk dancing people are easier to govern than sober, not dancing people. So, yeah, that benefited me. It benefited them, and it cost the taxpayer next to nothing. I'm getting paid $100 a month, maybe. And, a little bit of housing, a little bit of transport. If you bundle it all together, you're looking at what, $5,000? This guy to go sit in the jungle for 2 years and make America known to people who would never know America if it wasn't for meeting Peace Corps volunteers like me and my colleagues. I'm not trying to hold myself above them. I was not. But the other folks who were there working, and we all had different strengths. All of our weaknesses came out, I can assure you, just because of sitting in the jungle by yourself for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It can be stressful, but we had to learn to deal with that. It was all that together is why I think the Peace Corps is a great experience. You got a kid that's just graduated from college, doesn't know what to do, or whatever, just lost his job and they're flouncing around for a new direction. Look at the Peace Corps. They will put you to work and they will take care of you and your life will be changed.
That's really good. That's a good PR promo here for Peace Corps. We might bundle that up and see if we could do something with it. You've mentioned a couple times, and also this is prevalent in your book, Jeff, is that I think you used the exact word escape. You were looking to escape from where you were in Ohio and your family. This is what crossed my mind while I was reading through it. When I went through some tough stuff after '08, and we actually lost our home and stuff like that. We went through quite a financial challenge. My wife and I started traveling, and I had somebody ask me one time, they go, "Are you running away from something or are you running to something?" I've looked back on that and I believe that often there was a season that I was running away, but then at some point there was a click where no, I was then running to something. So I'm going to kind of pose that question to you. I know early on you were running away and maybe even you continued. Are you still running away? Are you now running to, and at what point did that change or shift in your life, if that is the case?
That's a phenomenal question. Without question, I was running away when I started at the age of 20. I did my best to stay away from Ohio, even when I was back in the States. I had 2 daughters, and so we had to take them to my grandmother's once a year, and I stayed in Ohio for just as short a time as possible. Now, I transitioned from running away from a life that I did not really like to running towards my next adventure. And I'm not trying to push my book, but what the last sentence in that book is cry havoc and let loose the dogs of adventure. That's a modification of Shakespeare, which is cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war. I don't want war. I want adventure. So am I running to more adventure? Absolutely. Every chance I get. That's one of the things that makes my wife crazy, makes my kids crazy. Where's dad going now? I don't know. I'm going someplace because I'm not a young man anymore and I'm going to keep chasing adventure for as long as I can. And yeah, if I'm blessed, right now I'm 66 years old, I'm in good health, and we're looking at going back to Uganda here in a couple of months. And we'll see what kinds of adventures come from there. I've been very blessed because I lived in Uganda for a year where I was head of the third largest security company there. But I met some good people, some great people. One of the great people there is a gentleman by the name of Daniel O'Mara, who was a comedian, a real live stand-up comedian. He was best man at my wedding. Hilarious guy. I met a TV personality. She currently has her own TV show there now. And so I've already reached out to them and said, hey, I'm coming back to Uganda for my next adventure because the adventure here in Tampa, Florida has pretty much played itself out. And I'm used to the weather here. I'm going to go do something new. So I'm just looking at the next adventure. The lady has already said, okay, I want you to start doing content creation. That's a lot harder than it sounds. So I sent her some of the stuff I'd already written on leadership, on how to persuade people, things that are from my background. So we can start working on that. And I'll work with the comedian who's a good personal friend of mine. I've helped him out of some tough spots. We've had a lot of fun together. And so I'll go back there and see what my next adventure is. I'm very much looking forward to it. I think everybody defines adventure differently, and that's okay. Whatever your adventure is, let loose the dogs of adventure and chase it. If it's going to the grocery store, make that your adventure. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But chase your adventure, because if you sit back and let the adventure get away from you, it's your loss. But if you go after it and you trip and fall on your face 10 or 20 times, I've done that. That's just all part of the adventure. So I encourage people to follow their adventure, no matter how small it is. You guys are on your own adventure driving around in an RV. I'm kind of jealous. I wish I could, you want to stay in my house for a year and I'll drive your RV around for a year. Let me know if you want to do that. We'll work something out. We have to not be afraid of challenges. That's not to say that we live in a perfect world and that we'll master every one of them. My first marriage failed after 2.5 decades. So no, I'm not perfect. And yes, the book is in fact dedicated to her. So we need to experience adventure. That is what will keep us going. And I'm not talking watching TV experience adventure. I'm talking go camping. Here in the state of Florida, we're blessed to have lots of places to go camping. Got to watch out for the gators. Got to be smart. But there's plenty of places where you can go for a hike in the woods in this country, and you can have your own adventure as you define it and enjoy life and then cry havoc. Let's flip the dogs of adventure.
I love that. And, obviously you're talking to someone who has maybe a little bit different lifestyle also. Can you sit and be still for periods of time? Is there a link that you've noticed? Because I have noticed it. I don't want to say adventure, but sometimes adrenaline can be like a drug that people are addicted to it. And I don't know that adventure could be similar, I guess. But what have you noticed about your rhythms? Obviously, you're mature, you're in good health. I'm 61. So we're at an age where a lot of people, a lot of our associates are done. And when I say done, they're done in a lot of ways. I don't really feel that. Now, I don't go at the pace I once did, but what would you say if I say, can you be still for a season? It sounds like you have been for a little while and it's now time to go, correct?
I used to get what my now ex-wife would call sticky feet. My feet start sticking to the ground. It's like, okay, I've been here too long. Time to go. Time to see what's next. And yeah, if I have a good reason, I was berated by my now ex-wife because when I was planning to go back overseas, I just established a relationship with my youngest daughter and her daughter, my granddaughter. She was very displeased with me for doing it then. She thought I needed to send. We don't talk very often. In fact, I think that's the only conversation we've had in a long time. And she excoriated me for that. And she was right. I needed to pay attention to developing a relationship with my granddaughter so my granddaughter will know who I am or who I was or whatever the case may be. And she was right. So, yes, there are always reasons to be thoughtful about what you're doing and make sure that it is the right thing for you. And it's not the right thing for everybody. Not everybody should live overseas. Not everybody should be a Peace Corps volunteer. Not everybody should be a podcast host. You need to find the niche that you fit in. But when you find that niche, you need to also make sure you can enjoy it. If you've got my book, and I know you do, my favorite picture is that one. Because that's what 45 years looks like. And I've had people look at it and go, who's the guy with all the hair? Yeah, smack. So, yes, I think I can sit still. I would obviously sit still for my daughter or my granddaughter, either my daughters or my grandchildren, obviously. My sister, maybe, probably. My 2 brothers, probably not. Just not the way it is. But that's okay. The thing about this country and the American persona, if I can use that term, and that's a really broad term. I realize I'm really going into a minefield here. Americans are highly mobile people. We don't live in our family home. Many places in Europe, they live in the home they grew up in. So we're a highly mobile people. Jobs are easily transported. Sometimes that means the job gets taken away. Sometimes that means we have to go find a job. But I think we have so many opportunities in this country to look at so many different things, to see so much of life and to experience so much of life that unfortunately we think we can see it on TV. And that's just not the case. So I do like to travel. I do like to move. Can I stay in one place for 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Yeah, I can. I have. I got to mix it up once in a while and go on and get in trouble somehow. It depends on what's keeping me there. We all make the decisions that we make. For my
We
daughter and granddaughter, of course.
we have people all the time ask us this question, "When are you gonna settle down?" And I kinda get a little bit irritated by that because I'm like going, "I don't know that I ever will," air quotes here for those listening. I do wanna say this though, this is interesting. We're in our RV right now, and we are in the alley behind our daughter's home in Colorado Springs visiting our 5-year-old and 3-year-old granddaughters, and last night I went to the ballet recital, and we kind of can combine it, and we're migrating north now as the weather changes, so we do have to kind of, I guess, balance those type things. The thing that drew me, Jeff, I must admit, was something that you first of all, the CIA, we're gonna talk about that before we wrap up here, but I wanna talk a little bit about all of your trips to Damascus because I'm a Bible guy, and there are stories in the Bible, a lot of them that fascinate me, but there is one in particular that you highlight, and you have walked these streets, you've been to this place, and so I wanna preface it, I've actually got the Bible open right here to Acts 9, and it's they say that his name was changed from Saul to Paul. It technically wasn't. It was just a different, you know, it was basically who was talking to him at the time. But someone who was killing Christians goes to Damascus, has an experience, and it changes. And then I'm really fascinated by this guy, Ananias. So you've got someone that had been killing and looking for probably you because he was a disciple in that area, and the Lord speaks to him and says, "Okay, I want you to go see this person, Saul, Paul, and minister to him." And I'm going, what the heck would you, if you were Ananias, what would be going through your head? But you have been there, walked the streets, been to the chapel, all in this area. What do we need to know about this geographic area? Is it just a cool spot? What do you want to tell us about the road to Damascus?
It's first, that's a caveat. Pray that the current political situation there fixes itself soon. The Assad family, Hafez and then Bashar, they were dictators. They were not nice people. They did, however, protect religious minorities in Syria because the Alawites were a religious minority. So they did a good job of that. I just want to put that preface at. Now, back to Damascus itself. Damascus, in the first 100 years of Christianity, was the second most important city in the Christian world, only after Jerusalem. So when you read about whoever got converted to whoever, however you want to call their names, in Acts chapter 9, Ananias, the reason he did that, according to my reading, is he had a vision from Jesus who said, go do this. Now, I don't think I've had a vision from Jesus in my lifetime. I hope if I do, number one, I recognize it. And number two, I act accordingly. So I think he was acting accordingly. And you have many, many religious people in that part of the world. Remember, Islam did not exist at the time. There was only Judaism and Christianity, and then Christianity was brand new. So Damascus is, I think, the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. If it's not the first, it's the second. It's been around a long, long time. So that history gives it a lot of fascination for me. Its importance in religion. When you read the story, as you continue reading that Bible story, he was lowered over the wall so that the Jews would not kill him after his conversion to Christianity. Every time I went there, I went to St. Paul's Chapel and I lit a candle. I'm Lutheran. We don't like candles. I went and lit a candle every time and said a prayer every time. So to be able to overemphasize the importance of just that section of wall to our Christian faith, I don't think you can overemphasize that. That's where he was lowered over the wall. When you go down the street called Straight, just inside it's called Beb Sharki, which is the city gate right there that the street called Straight goes on. About 700 yards off to the right down a street is St. Paul's underground chapel. And you can go in there and you can go to the chapel underground. That chapel's been there 2,000 years. My goodness. Come on. How much more influence, how much more of an impact could you have on your own faith? And we all deal with our faith individually. You do it your way. My wife is Catholic and she's married to a Lutheran. So trying to figure out which one of us is the heretic here. Although my pastor does say that Catholics make the best Lutherans. You have to laugh about that if you understand what he's saying. You do. Good. So the influence that Syria and Damascus had on Christianity cannot be overstated. As you go north out of Damascus, you come to a town called Sednaya. This is where you have monasteries that were built by Emperor Justinian I in about the year 400. Again, before Muhammad was a twinkle in his daddy's eye. They built these monasteries. And just to visit them, if it's not inspirational to you, then you need to kind of look a little harder. And these used to be big pilgrimage locations in that part of the world because there were so many of these monasteries built at that time. This one monastery, I think it's called Our Lady of Sednaya. In there, number one, there's a painting of the Holy Mother done by the Apostle Luke, done by St. Luke. So he painted a picture of Mary and it is hanging in that monastery. And you know how steps wear with time? You get these little depressions in them when they're, hundreds of years old. Apparently, some time ago, they were carrying a vat of olive oil up those steps and some of the oil spilled out into one of those depressions. And they saw a vision of the Holy Mother in that oil. So now when you go visit, you go into the monastery, you go down into the basement because that's where they keep the oil. That's also where the prayer room is. Where you can go, you write out what kind of prayer for whom, and you stick it in the wall. They will dip a little wad of cotton into that same vat of oil that they saw the Virgin Mother in, put a little Ziploc bag and give it to you to take home. Now, I'm not saying that oil isn't a little bit dilute right now, but it's not the oil that counts. It's the symbolism that counts. The symbolism that comes with taking a vat of oil where they saw an image of the Holy Mother. Again, I'm Lutheran. We don't worship the Holy Mother, but that doesn't make her any less significant to me as a Christian. So I get to take that little bit of oil home with me. So these are some of the places in Syria. That's how important that place is. As I said, we got to pray to God that they'll stop killing each other soon and that we can go back to having tourists go to Syria because it is a fascinating country. As I said, Damascus is so important to our history. Our cultural and our religious history can't be overemphasized. And, when you're walking down a street that's written about in the Bible, that's kind of got to get your attention. And when you go into St. Paul's underground church, come on, that doesn't have an impact on you. It's just a fascinating city. The people are as nice as the day is long. I never had any issues there. My now ex-wife and 2 daughters went with me on one trip there, and they were so well treated, so courteous. It was awesome.
I love the history. And one of the things, I think this is speaking to, we'll call it U.S. Christians. We've been beating up on U.S. folks. Let's just keep going, I guess, is that they will read the Bible and they'll read the Bible as if it was, directly written to them and without any context. And I love that you were able to frame some context about this real location that Paul was transformed and that it is in scripture. I mean, it's right here in front of me. And then Paul went on to write a majority of the New Testament. That is so incredible. I want to shift just a little bit in our last few minutes because we've got this CIA thing that's been kind of lingering over the conversation that is also very attractive about Jeff's history and things like that. It's like, okay, these 3-letter agencies, people are bashing them. We're bashing them in the media and the press, and there could be real reason why they need to be. But uh, with whatever you can, tell us about the experience. And I know there's some things you can't tell, And I guess maybe let me ask it in a little bit different way. What should we be asking about the CIA? What are some things that I should be asking that I'm maybe missing, that I'm trying to do the things that I'm hearing in the press and say, tell me about all the countries y'all, you brought your propaganda in and changed the governments and all this kind of stuff. Tell me what I should be asking about the CIA.
My initial response goes back to my opening comment that has to do with the caliber of the people working in the CIA, the sacrifices that they and their families make in the CIA. Yeah, it's a government bureaucracy job, but they go to places that are not necessarily nice places to go. Under Carter and, the peace dividend, is that when that came out? And they started shutting down offices and consolidating offices. And then 9/11 happened and they realized that they'd made a mistake in consolidation. So I think it's important to recognize that the people that serve overseas may be working out of an embassy and they may have the security of being part of the embassy, but that doesn't mean that they don't risk their lives when they go out to do a mission, when they go out on an operation. In the past, countries generally do not execute other countries' intelligence officers. However, terrorist organizations will. Even the incarceration, yeah, you're going to get arrested if you get caught by the Chinese and you'll be unhappy, or pick a country. I don't mean to pick on the Chinese. They'll be unhappy for a while, a week, 2 weeks, a month, a couple months, but you'll be fine. So I think we need to recognize the sacrifices that they make. Let me see if I can bring home one of the activities that I was very involved with when I was a senior officer at headquarters. We work very hard to prevent the sale and distribution of weapons of mass destruction. We're talking missile technology, nuclear, chemical, biological weapons. That is a very serious issue. And my last job was to supervise the identification and prevention of the movement of some of these materials. And I will give you an example. And I had an analyst come to me and say, we have a ship that is moving materials from someplace in the Far East to someplace in the Middle East, and we don't want those materials to go there. And this officer said to me, it's already on its way. I don't know if there's anything that we can do, so I'm not sure what to do. And my response given to her, and I'd worked with this officer for probably 2 years by this time. So she knew me and I knew her. And so I very pointedly but politely said, we swing at every pitch. So you get the emails out to every place along this possible route, and you find this material and you stop it. And again, I was polite, but those were her orders. And I said to her, if you have any trouble getting the emails out of the building, it's actually cable traffic and it goes through a long approval process. If you have any trouble getting the cables out, you come see me and I will go fix whatever's blocking the road. And she said, okay. The next morning she came to me and said, Chief, we got it. We got it and we turned it around. So she got an award for that. What had I done? I had empowered her to fail. Failure is something that we don't like to talk about. Nobody wants to fail. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, invented how not to invent the light bulb. I think 1,000 times before he invented how to invent the light bulb. Did he fail? No, he simply invented something that was of no use to anybody. So we have to accept failure as a path to our success. If we let failure stop us, then failure wins. But if we simply redo it, then we can continue.
Yeah,
And that was that lesson. She got an award for it and off she went.
yeah, that's good. And so much of me wants to just keep digging, but I know this is one thing fascinating. I wonder if the CIA gets excited when they find out that one of their former employees is writing a book. I'm going to hold it up here. I'm sure they love that, don't they?
They have to approve it. They
Yeah.
get to approve it.
Explain the title to me. I'm holding up for those on the video, but
Yeah, sure.
I've mispronounced that. Human INT for humanity, a journey
Humans.
into the world less traveled. Explain that, and then I've got a question or two before we wrap up.
Sure. Human stands for human intelligence. That was what we collect in the CIA. We collect intelligence from human sources. SIGINT is signals intelligence. That's what the NSA collects. They vacuum up every electronic signal out there, they put it on a big computer, and they look at it. So ELINT is electronics intelligence. OSINT is open source intelligence. That's where the analysts get to read the newspaper. So this book is human intelligence for humanity because I want to try and bring to people the human perspective of what many places, we've talked about a couple of them already, many places in the world are like. What is it like in the jungles of Gabon? What was it like for my wife going to the post office in New Delhi? What was it like traveling to many of the countries I've been to? I'm not very complimentary with one of our biggest allies in the region, which is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a tough place. Don't kid yourself. So that's why I wrote the book, because I wanted to try and color in gaps that you're not going to see anyplace else. You're not going to get to read about the challenge that my cousin had with the guys coming up on the beach in Oman, or that my wife had to deal with going to the market in New Delhi for the first time. Or those are not the kind of challenges that you'll read about or see in a James Bond movie or on CNN or Fox News. I don't mean to pick on either of them, but you're not going to see it because there's that's not what they do. So the idea behind this book, my motivation was to try and color in the gaps that I know are there. They're there because I can see them because I've actually been to these places. I've been to Oman. I've been to Yemen. What a terrible place. And yet these are countries we read about all the time in the newspaper. But if we don't have a really good flavor for what they're talking about, because we only believe what we see on the news, and I'm sure you would agree that you can find a news broadcast for every political belief out there. So what I'm trying to do is bring a little bit different perspective. I try not to push an agenda on either side because that's not what the book is about. I do talk about my work in the agency because of my admiration for the agency and for the employees. I think I made it clear the respect I have for the people that work there. What I haven't made clear is the disrespect I have for some of the leadership we've had in the past. The rank and file, they do great things. And I wanted to bring this book home to people so they can see, they can read when we talk about Saudi Arabia, because I think Trump, wasn't he just in Saudi Arabia along with being Qatar, I think? So when we talk about Saudi Arabia, I mean, you got these princely guys and, Saudi Aramco and oil money, but nobody really digs down deep and looks at some of the sad things, let's call it that have happened in Saudi Arabia. They had a girls' school catch fire and they kept them locked in there because they didn't have on their headscarves, and a bunch of them died. That's Saudi Arabia. Now think about that. That's one of our biggest allies in the Middle East. I hope that when they read that, that sticks in somebody's craw, because that's why I wrote it. Because I want to try and color in the human angle, the human intelligence of some of these places, and bring humanity back to the forefront. So we make decisions based on humanity.
Yeah, and I could tell that and I think this is cool. This comes across in the book. You're quite the storyteller. I've enjoyed it here because you've done that. I'm sure Amazon, any other way to connect with you if someone wants to, Amazon, the best place to go to get the book?
Yeah, Amazon, you can get the book. I have a website. It is Jeffrey S as in Scott Sanow. So it's jeffreysanow.com is my website. They can get the book on Amazon, as you said. They can connect with me through there. I would encourage people to read the reviews that are up. So far, I've gotten 1 4. I don't know why they didn't put any comments, but the rest are all 5s. And I would encourage you to go back and put your comments in there as well. That helps other readers know what to expect.
Yeah, I'll go in and give a review. I appreciate it. The book is Human for Humanity, holding up my copy here on my Kindle, A Journey into the World less traveled. No doubt that Jeffrey Sanow has lived a life and is continuing to live a life of a less traveled person. I appreciate you being here, Jeffrey. This has been a great conversation. If you've been listening in, go check out the book. I'm going to go leave a review for you, Jeffrey. So I'll go in and do that. And I know that as an author, we all appreciate that. We are Seek, Go, Create here. We've got new episodes every Monday. I appreciate you listening in on YouTube or all the podcast platforms and all that you're doing there. I appreciate it. And again, check out all of Jeffrey's stuff. We will see everyone next week on Seek, Go, Create. Hey, before you go, I want to leave you with a challenge. If you're enjoying the conversations here on Seek, Go, Create, I think you'll love the deeper journey my novel Coach, A Story of Success Redefined, takes you on. It's a story that's moved many of my readers to rethink what success actually means and how to live a life aligned with faith, purpose, and peace. Pick up your copy today wherever you buy books or at timwinders.com and begin the journey for yourself. Thanks again for listening. And as always, keep seeking, keep going, and keep creating.